Hello and welcome to Pardon My Disruption. I am Alan Berkson. I am the Director of Community Outreach for Freshdesk, and I'm joined as usual by the Dr. Jonathan Yarmis, Dr. Disruptive. We come here monthly to talk about the latest in tech news, and we've had some interesting stuff this past month. You had just said something before we got on air about your prioritization for the things we talk about was based on.
This is based on, I think, random delight that everything is interesting.
But at the same time, who was it who?
Oh, yeah. The lead item is because my mother emailed and asked about something, and you know when it trickles down to her, 87 years old. Sorry, Ma, for outing you. that something has decidedly hit the mainstream.
Yes, and this is the billions. I feel like we need Carl Sagan.
Yeah, or Mike Myers. Billions and billions. Yeah.
1 billion user IDs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they're the Russians who've hacked. Apparently, depending upon how you want to count it. And there's question about the numbers, but something approaching 1.2 billion user IDs. And
minutes.
and the talking stopwatch, which will let us know we're on time. But anyhow, this is one of those ones my mother called and asked, what should I do? And for perhaps the first time in my life, I threw up my hands and said, just pray. Because number one, that's a lot of passwords and IDs to have stolen, and it's on the heels of one a couple of months ago where we had lots of passwords stolen and the recommendation was change everything. And in this instance, we don't even know what sites were hacked, whether they've changed their code to prevent the hack. So you may go change your password and they go, aha, we've got the new one. And the net result being, I think there are a couple of things that need to be done. Number one, the long-term answer clearly is that username and password is not a reliable enough approach to securing websites. And so what we need to do is look at some other things like two-factor authentication, biometrics, and two-factor I think is going to be increasingly important. And Google itself has kind of sent a message to people just in the last couple of days saying that doing things more securely is important. So they're changing their PageRank algorithm for Google search so that if you use HTTPS secure authentication, that they will slightly boost your page ranking. But the bottom line is, I think username and password is inherently insecure, and what we're going to have to do, I think, is two things. One, it's like, okay, what happens if my username and password is stolen? What are the risks? And the risks in some ways, well, if they can get into your bank account or your credit card statements or something like that, that's an issue where you need to monitor activity. But oh, by the way, it may be a nuisance to you, but the burden comes to the credit card company, because if your stuff is using fraudulently, you're not liable for the charges.
Well, and from that perspective, I know my bank now requires two-factor authentication for me. So the first time I log on from my computer, it'll say, do you want us to call you or send you a text?
Right.
So it's actually requiring, it's ironic because I don't know, is RSA stock going to go up or? Because I remember my secure ID. That was.
Yeah, or the interesting thing, the phone is now really important because so much authentication, my two-factor authentication app is on my phone.
Right.
Do you secure your phone with a password or a passcode or some other way? Because now if your phone gets stolen, this is increasingly the keys to your kingdom. So what I said, one, make sure your phone is secure. Two, make sure you've got one of those security packages where you can remotely locate and ideally wipe your phone so that if it's stolen, you can at least mitigate against the damage. Number three, and again, I told my mother, whatever you do, I know it's convenient to have one-click purchase on Amazon. I'm not storing my credit card information there because, if you store your credit card information, that's one step further. If somebody hacks in, they now can conceivably get and or use your credit card. So that's the highest nuisance factor. Again, it doesn't impact what you'll ultimately owe the credit card company. It may take you a few months to fight it out.
So what's the opportunity from an innovation point of view?
I think security is a great thing. So that we're going to have to do.
Skip this.
Yeah.
It's too annoying.
Our timer system is talking.
Whenever there's a big challenge like that, and I think it's okay to take a couple of minutes on this. Who are the winners and losers? Meaning, who stands to gain by the fact that we now need to have two-factor authentication or something like that? That a simple user ID and password is not enough.
Yeah. One, I think existing security players obviously, stand to gain. Although, it's one of always those unseemly things, where a lot of these security outages are in fact outed by security companies themselves who stand the most to gain. Right. And in the particular instance, there's a whole protocol around what you disclose, when you disclose it, what are the ethical responsibilities. It's now an SEC level, CEO level thing, as we've discovered, from the Target breach, that failing to adequately protect your customers can cost the CEO their job. Now, it may have been the Target thing is more complicated. It may have been a convenient excuse to fire a CEO who the board had questions about. Anyhow, but the bottom line is, these things are increasingly important. I think, the issue now is this is no longer in the hands of the technologists. It's business people need to do some serious understanding of business risk. And a long-term thing, I just get concerned about the fragility of the system. I'm one of these people who loves technology. And I've spent, most of my entire professional career in technology and think it can do wonderful things. But the fragility of the system is such, and this leads us into our next discussion about the Internet of Things. The fragility of the system is such that little things can have really wide-ranging repercussions that are, negative in terms of our ability to conduct business.
Right. Well, security has always been a convenience versus safeguarding, and so we always give up one for the other.
Well, and I'd add a third dimension to it. It's convenience, but it's also been a cat and mouse game where the bad guys discover something, we go fix it, and the bad guys discover another thing.
Right. It's an arms race.
Yeah, but the issue is in this arms race, they're now up to tactical nuclear weapons. So this is not one of those matters of we arm. They arm, we arm. Stealing 1 billion passwords. It's kind of amazing when you think about, what 1 billion passwords. That's a lot of people. That's 3 passwords for every American kind of thing. This is huge scale, and so this arms race has reached a point where, and it also used to be that when nation states are doing it, we've got a mutually assured destruction thing. If they do it to us, we do it to them. Right. We all get messed up. And mutually assured destruction works well when you have nation states. When you have rogue entities with capabilities like this, where our ability to strike back at them is virtually non-existent.
Negligible.
Yeah, right. The disincentive for one party to launch that attack goes away. Especially because many of them operate from countries where there's been some benign tolerance of their behavior, unwillingness to prosecute, and so on. And I think we're entering a dangerous stage where the whole environment we've got is based on our mutual trust. And when you get rogue players involved, it can have significant negative impact. And I don't know that we've got great responses yet. I'm not doing things. The minor changes I've made is if there's an increased likelihood, the convenience of entering a credit card every time I buy something instead of having it stored,
Right.
Is a minor inconvenience.
Right.
And so I'll live with that minor inconvenience to reduce my risk of greater inconvenience. But
so what's the impact on the Internet of Things?
Yeah, well,
because we have
the Internet of Things, when we start connecting our homes, our devices,
right.
our automobiles.
So right now, if we lose a password,
yeah.
All right, so they maybe they get into our Amazon account or their bank account, but there are safeguards built into there. But now they can control my car or my house or my my radio. They can change stations on me.
Oh no! What's a radio?
That's what I have one in my car.
Yeah.
Of course, my car is old.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But when they start being able to, because we already seen this, at a macro level with, I believe it's a Syrian nuclear reactor that got, infected, and we set back their ability to enrich uranium by years by destroying the centrifuges.
Right.
That's an example of what's going to be capable. We'll be able to mess with your home environmental, so I'll be able to turn your thermostat way up so you increase spoilage of thing. I'll mess with your refrigerator, and cars get to be a really interesting thing because so much of this stuff is interconnected.
With the whole, it's particularly with cars. I think there's a. I think we talked about this on a show before. Tesla put out a patch because they can patch their cars on the fly.
Yeah.
And I know someone who had purchased a car, and they liked the fact that the Tesla would, the suspension would lower for highways. But it was causing problems because they were afraid of the battery and stuff like that, so they put out a patch. But one of the reasons he bought the car was that function, which he spent all this money, and now they took it away.
Disabled. Yeah, but we've lived with that. Apple does the same thing. All the apps you've got on your iPhone, if Apple decides they don't like one of them, it can go away. I think that's a different thing. But with the Internet of Things, I believe there have been instances where police forces have contacted GM with OnStar and have disabled cars. And when you think about the consequences of that, and GM's an interesting company to mention in this context because they're now, Mary Barra is having to answer questions again and again and again about these ignition problems and the fatal accidents they've caused. What are the implications that you're driving along on the highway and I can turn your engine off? And there are all sorts of things that, the challenge with security has been and always has been is you've been involved in feature product discussions, and we talk about what features do we want to add next, and what can we do, and what can we do, and what can we do. And only well late into the process, if not subsequent iterations, do we ask the question, how do we secure this?
It's always about how do we make it more convenient for someone or easier, or how do we make it more profitable? But the last thing is, all right, we came with this great idea. Now, how is somebody going to hack it or break it or take advantage of it?
Yeah, and security is one of those things from a marketing perspective is very difficult and a slippery slope because the moment you start saying we're more secure than others, that number one, you're painting a target on your back. Gee, let's go prove they think they're more secure than others. Ha ha. They're not, and security is never an absolute thing. I remember a discussion I had back in about 1994 with a CIO at IBM where she said, we'll never let users use the internet. I'm there. I mean, that's one of those interesting statements, and I said, why not? And she said, well, it's not secure. I can't guarantee the security. And I said, the only secure system is one that has no users. The moment we let the first user, we're willing to accept some level of insecurity. And this whole connected thing, we're basically saying we're willing to accept high levels of insecurity. But it's one thing when it's what displays on my screen, what shows up on my credit card statement. It's another thing when it's what happens to my elevator? What happens to my car? What happens to my environmental systems? What happens to my door locks?
But if you go back to Y2K, that was a fear.
Yes.
That elevators wouldn't work, and because they're computer controlled.
Yeah.
But we're just going to explode that by an exponential factor in terms of the risk factor.
Yeah, I must admit, I was concerned enough about Y2K. I was one of those Gartner analysts who was talking about it, and I really do believe that there were concerns there, and had we not spent the time effort, there would have been things that manifested itself. I was concerned enough. I spent Y2K in Orlando at Disney World because I figured if somebody's going to handle it right, even if things go wrong, Disney's going to manage the crowds and so on. So I was quite relieved when that afternoon, Asia wasn't blowing up and Europe wasn't blowing up. So I enjoyed a wonderful Disney vacation.
All right. So now that we've scared everybody, I wrote a blog post actually a long time ago, it was 2010, where I talked about is iPhone ready for the enterprise? And this was, if you have to think back, but it was RIM ruled the roost. RIM was mobile for the enterprise. But every CEO wanted the coolest device, and they said, make sure I can get my email on my iPhone.
You asked the wrong question. It's not is iPhone ready for the enterprise. Is enterprise ready for the iPhone?
Right. So IBM and Apple announced a deal.
Yeah.
It's got some interesting implications.
I mean, this is one of those where if ever anything made sense, yeah, they're strange bedfellows. Yeah, they were enemies for a period of time. But this is a real easy one to fix. What put these guys together is, IBM no longer has a device strategy particularly, and the net result being, what are they going to do? What's their sales force going to offer? They're calling on people. And Apple, more importantly, as these things have penetrated the enterprise, there's been growing pressure for Apple to say, what's your enterprise strategy? And Apple has always had a strong reluctance because being an enterprise solution provider is just an ugly business. The margins aren't anywhere near as good as selling iPhones. You get people, instead of saying, we love everything you do, and Apple's got customers who love everything. The best thing an enterprise is ever going to say, we barely tolerate your existence. Right. We wish you would go away and die, but since you're here, we need to do something about you. And in one fell swoop, Apple gets to say, not our problem. Here, our good friend IBM is going to handle this. And so this is Apple's enterprise strategy to say, not my problem. And IBM's very happy to say, yep, we'll take on that problem because there are already a bunch of things for which IBM is doing in the enterprise that this is a natural extension. Now, is it earth-shattering? Is it the kind of thing that, IBM all of a sudden, reinvigorates growth? No, I don't think so. It's a nice extension to what they're already doing. I think basically though it helps Apple in the enterprise. I'm hard pressed to say Apple will necessarily sell more iPhones because it's still largely a customer-driven decision. But on the margin, it'll help.
So I was talking to someone at IBM, and when I think about Apple and IBM, and I think about the challenge that I thought about, which is how do I secure my mobile devices within my enterprise? As the beauty of, love it or hate it, the beauty of BlackBerry Enterprise Server was the fact that information never left my enterprise.
Right.
Because even if I was browsing the internet on my BlackBerry, it was going through BlackBerry Enterprise Server. I can control everything. But he pointed out a different aspect is that on the software development end. You want to be able to push your corporate apps, and not just. I'm not talking about you bought Workday or you bought PeopleSoft or Salesforce. I'm talking about your internal stuff. Mm-hmm. But you need to be able to push that out through an app store, and there's no this is sort of a boost to that expertise and that legitimacy. Yeah,
I mean, when you say a boost, I almost might argue that when these two behemoths get together, it's acknowledgement of something that was already going on. So it's not necessarily a boost. That they've seen the trend that IT organizations know that they've got to solve a problem here, and IBM now has a stake in the game. But I think the bigger beneficiary here is Apple, who now has an opportunity to say, we've got an enterprise strategy, and they've got it with the best enterprise partner you could ever hope for. So I think it lets Apple focus on what Apple's good at, and IBM gets some marketing benefit from it. But these are things IBM was already, they weren't doing the selling of the devices, but they were already involved in service and support of devices, and they now get to extend the capabilities with a formal relationship. We'll see if there are any real collaborative initiatives that arise out of this. I was on a conference call, with IBM where they were talking about that there were opportunities, that this is more than just a sales and service agreement. I'm not convinced of that, because I can imagine an Apple UI developer sitting in the same room with an IBM enterprise developer, and the two of them need someone to translate, because they're talking totally different languages with totally different focuses. So, we may discover some synergies, but I think the deal makes enormous sense for both parties merely on the merits of Apple, designating a great enterprise partner.
Speaking of not doing so well in the enterprise, let's talk Microsoft. Well, they have to work on their communication skills a little
bit. You're talking about the layoffs,
right?
Where they announced whatever was 15,000 layoffs, and basically said, and we'll tell people within the next year. It's like, ouch. I mean, best practice is layoffs. You've let the people know before it's hit the news, or very quickly thereafter, because there are organizations where this creates such a deleterious effect where everybody's now scared because everybody thinks they're one of the 15,000, and so they all start to float their resumes, and the people who leave are the good people, the people you wanted to keep.
Right.
Now, some of it's been a bit overstated, because a lot of the layoffs, well over half of them, are coming from the Nokia handset division that Microsoft acquired. And so these aren't the traditional, they're not long-term Microsoft employees. A lot of that is in recognition of the fact that the devices business they've got is a lot smaller.
Well, so in contrast to IBM, which got out of the devices business, Microsoft is almost doubling down on the devices business.
Yeah, well, what they've looked at is Apple. They've clearly got Apple envy, and Microsoft has had some. There have been challenges and advantages over the years to being. I mean, the Wintel ecosystem served Microsoft really, really well.
Billions and billions.
Yeah, and tens of billions. Yeah. I mean, it served them very well, and they looked at, and from their early forays with Windows Mobile, have said, gee, we can build the same kind of ecosystem that served us well in the PC business, in the mobile device business. And lo and behold, not only has it not worked, you've got the other player out here, Samsung, in the Google ecosystem, and the whole Google, Android, 17,000 different versions of Android kind of problem. And Microsoft says, yeah, maybe, just maybe, mobile devices are a different kettle than desktop, and therefore to do what we need to do, we need to control the entire environment. The related question is, I mean, Samsung, and is it really attractive being a hardware player in the mobile ecosystem?
Right. So, but why is Microsoft, the Surface lost money?
But they have 1.7 billion. Wow. I guess the thing of the day is billion. Well, they've lost a lot of money.
But the fact that you lose money, I don't know. you could say you're trying to build a market.
Yeah.
And they have cool, they have cool commercials. I like the service commercials. Their new Windows Phone commercial. They're trying to build it. But is there room in that market for a third player?
I don't believe so. But the issue is, do they have an opportunity to be the second player?
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to be number one. You just have to beat number two.
Right. Yeah. And what are Microsoft's strengths? Microsoft's strengths, among other things, if we were having this discussion 20 years ago about Microsoft in the database space, we would have said, they're going up against IBM and Oracle and some other players. Is there really space in the market for another database player? And Microsoft stuck to it. And
that's because they stole the software from Sybase.
Well, not stole. Sybase knew what they were doing. Microsoft
bargained with the devil.
Yeah. And here Microsoft is a player. I think at some level, does Microsoft, to be a next generation provider that they're looking at being, do they need to be a credible device provider across a range of platforms? And I think it's easy to make the argument that, yes, some element of their future success requires that they stay in the space. So it's a smart investment.
Well, just like you use your mother as a barometer, I use my kids as a barometer, because that's the next generation making decisions about how they use technology.
I'll bet you there's no Windows in the Berkson household.
No, my kids use their desktops are Windows.
Oh, are they?
And they have Apple device. They have Apple mobile devices. But now they're going to want a laptop or some sort of a tablet. And what's the decision they're going to make? And what's going to go into that decision? Is it, I want everything that works together because it's all iCloud and it does that, or do I want to get a device that, based on its features, and then I'm comparing a Surface to an iPad?
Yeah, I think the ecosystem advantages are so compelling right now. We'll hopefully move to a world where there's more independence, and that's one of the challenges Microsoft is facing, and I think Satya Nadella will make different decisions than happened under the previous regime with regards to what platform should Office be on. For a while it was, Office is going to be on our platform. If you want Office, you'll get it on our platform. And Google said, thank you very much. And there are a large number of people, we shared the agenda for this device by using Google Docs.
Office is a bloated product.
It's enterprise legacy software,
right.
And there are a lot of people who are growing up, not using it and are using, various ecosystems, and I, as one who spans ecosystems, I've got both an Android and a Windows tablet, and my mobile phone's Android, and I find at times that having the Windows tablet, it's like, okay, it works well. I'm working with some people who have using the Windows platform, so the fact that the tablet integrates seamlessly with the Windows backend works really well here, where its existence in my Android ecosystem is less good, to say the least. And so ecosystems offer advantages.
Right. And so yes.
And Microsoft.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Yes or no? Can Microsoft get into that number 2 spot, or if so, what do they have to do?
I think they can get into that number 2 spot. I'd still consider a launch up, but I think the bigger what they have to do is keep executing on the path. I think what gets them conceivably to number 2 is the challenges of the Google ecosystem, where number 1, who's the leading player in the Google ecosystem? It's Samsung.
Right.
And Samsung is saying, this Google ecosystem kind of sucks. We're getting attacked at the low end, and Xiaomi is, past them in China and is likely to become the world's largest volume selling, mobile device manufacturer, maybe even this year. They're still being beaten by Apple at the high end. Is there a cozy middle ground? And oh, by the way, how do they differentiate? Samsung has spent some years trying to differentiate itself in the Android ecosystem, and much as nobody could ever do that in the Wintel environment. And so Microsoft and Intel got all of the profits, while the hardware manufacturers were just complicit enablers. Maybe Samsung, they're playing around with other platforms. Maybe Samsung decides, this Android thing just doesn't make a lot of money for us. What are we doing here? We need to build an ecosystem. So I think, well, when Samsung over, not necessarily, but I think it could be that the Android ecosystem collapses because it's not interesting to the hardware providers. It's actually not that terribly interesting to Google.
So Apple IBM has a strong enterprise story to tell, and it's about mobile, okay, and that's where Microsoft is weakest in their enterprise. How does
when you say they're weakest in their enterprise, they're weakest in terms of results. They've actually got a decent story to tell in terms of a full product line that extends capabilities down to mobile devices, phones, and tablets. So they've got a good story to tell.
The adoption.
So
you think that's lagging,
the adoption is lagging, although it's ticking up. It's still ugly percentage. They were about 1% of mobile data traffic a year ago. They're up around 3% now. Somewhere in that range. So they're heading in the right direction. If they triple it every year,
is the Surface an enterprise device?
Define enterprise devices. Yes.
Is it a device that I'm going to push out to my 5,000 person sales force, or push out to my employees, or that's to me an enterprise device is something that I'm going to write code, I'm going to write applications for, and develop processes around because it's important.
By the way, I think the answer to that for most enterprises is they're not going to pick a standard, because no matter what standard they pick, BYOD, bring your own device, suggests there are going to be Android and Windows devices and Apple devices in your enterprise, and if you want a fully comprehensive application development strategy, you're going to have to deploy against all three platforms. I know you hate hearing that story, but the answer is, BYOD is an inevitable thing. It's actually in many ways a good thing. It's saving the enterprise on hardware acquisition, because I'm buying these devices, and before you had to pay for them. So the enterprise benefits economically. So if it means you've got a greater application development burden, but it comes at the savings in device purchases, that's not a bad deal.
All right, so transitioning from enterprise to consumer, but staying in the mobile space, the largest consumer force has gotten into the mobile space.
Yes, we've got an Amazon phone.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it a?
We don't need the full 4 minutes for this.
No. No. That answers my question. Next topic.
Yawn. It's like, do I need a phone to shop more efficiently? No. Again, what can Amazon do with its own phone that it can't do on any other platforms other than, what's the user benefit? And I'm not sure that. Well, the user benefit right now is you get free Amazon Prime.
Right.
Yeah.
But they also get more data.
I know, but they're getting a lot of. Do they need more data? Yeah, they're getting more data. I'm not sure.
On their Kindle, they innovated. They have that help button. Are they going to? Is there something that they're going to be doing from that perspective? I mean, is it just a gimmick?
Yes. No, I think it's because they can.
Because they can. It doesn't cost them much. It's like,
right. Yeah. But
it's cheap.
Yeah, but I don't see them being a significant player. I don't see it giving them great benefit. And more data. More data. If they've got geographic location, they might be able to do things. But their apps are preloaded on so many phones anyhow. And we're starting to see, so for instance, Foursquare, just announced, or is delivering against its new vision of being available for local search.
Right.
And
which is how I use it.
Yeah.
Even before they
actually, I didn't, but that's another matter. We can talk about Foursquare in a moment. But one of the things the new Foursquare app does is it's gathering data even when you're not running the app. And I think that's one of those things where I don't know how I feel about that. This is one where there are people I know who are doing it, and I understand why they're doing it, and I'm happy for the value exchange. In Foursquare's instance, I'm actually considering uninstalling the app, that I don't get sufficient value from the app.
That's always your thing, is I'll trade you my information, but you have to give me
commensurate value.
Right.
Yes.
You have to make my life. You have to make this. Help me find things or do things that are going to that anticipate my needs as opposed to respond to my needs.
And also, oh, by the way, be transparent about it. Tell me about it. It's not like Foursquare trumpeted and it's talking about its new applications. Oh, by the way, we're always running and tracking your information, even when we're not running, when you haven't started the app. That was disclosed by third parties, and I sit there and it's like, okay, I don't like the relationship. I don't see the commensurate value, and I'm seriously considering uninstalling the app for that reason. So the whole issue of data exchange, value for data, is a multi. We could do an hour plus on that topic alone. But fair, informed exchange. We've seen this. We've had this discussion before with regards to Facebook and its mood settings, and the dating sites with giving you false information as experiments. And every time things are done without full disclosure, I get squirrely, and I think it's going to blow up in some people's faces. Let's be upfront about it, because when you don't do it, it's not good for me, and I will get rid of you for just that reason.
Sticking with social channels, we've talked before about Twitter and the value proposition of Twitter, and the fact that it's got the hardest learning curve of any app out there, any piece of software out there. Yet, their user count's up. They're getting more adoption. Maybe. What is that? What do you think?
Yeah, I still think they've got fundamental problems, as we've talked about before, and you nailed it right there. One, the out-of-box experience is terrible. I mean, the time to value. When people ask me, should I be using Twitter? The answer generally is, if you're not already using it, probably not.
My answer is, and look, I'm an early adopter. I'm a tech person. I'm used to it. Twitter took me easily 3 months to figure out, just to get an idea of how to work it, and how to. And
I'm still figuring it out.
The average person, how do they? So people say, well, why do you use? They ask you, why do you use Twitter, and how do you use Twitter? And if I can't answer that question like a simple sentence.
There's a simple answer. You met me that way.
Right. Talking about the Mets. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
But I think the answer is a lot of Twitter value can be derived from non-Twitter users. So people who highlight the tweets are things that are valuable. So I don't have to be a Twitter user at all. Somebody else is culling the tweet stream and showing relevant tweets or gathering that information. So it's input to sources that I rely on, but I myself don't need to be on Twitter to do that.
How are they? Meaning you'll see it in an article or on the news, or
I forget even what it was I was watching last night. Why am I? Discovery Channel. The guys, Mythbusters. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The new season. That if you tweeted with the hashtag Mythbusters Live, they were displaying tweets in real time on the TV show. So you didn't need to be a Twitter user. They were using their own editorial judgment to display interesting tweets on the screen. So you'll see it, as companion television stuff. You'll see news articles citing Twitter things. So there's no compelling need, for the most part, to be on Twitter. And the signal to noise ratio is terrible. You go to events, and you're a vendor. Make sure your guys don't do this. The hashtag gets hijacked by people going, come see it, come to my booth, come to my booth, come to my booth,
right,
rendering it totally useless as a discussion vehicle.
right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, so the signal to noise ratio is bad, the learning curve is bad, the urgency is not there.
But those same weaknesses are also the strengths, that it's everything and anything is discussed.
Yes.
And it's easily accessible.
Yes, but
because I'll compare it to like Reddit.
Right.
Reddit reminds me of the old Usenet news groups.
Yes.
But you have to be able to navigate Reddit. That as opposed to Twitter. It's a much simpler.
But I think the tools for Twitter use and consumption aren't what they need to be, and some of this is again a cautionary tale for an ecosystem owner. For a while, right. Twitter was very happy to have all of these people out there building tools for its ecosystem, until they realized some of them were monetizing the feed in a way that Twitter hadn't. So what Twitter did is they came in and A, made it difficult for some of those other players, and B, started competing with them. With the net being, when's the last time you saw an innovative new Twitter client?
Right.
Yeah. So they themselves, by their business practices, need to monetize their ecosystem.
Right.
Have stifled innovation.
So 2 quick questions on Twitter. Would you pay for Twitter? Would you pay to use Twitter?
Assuming everybody I knew was, the challenge they've got is if I knew all of my friends were going to use Twitter and pay for it, I would pay for it.
And what would you pay?
No more than a couple of bucks a month.
$10 a month is too much for Twitter?
Yeah. When I look at some of the other value,
you pay $10 a month for HBO.
Yeah. But the challenge gets to be, when you start adding up all these $10 a month kinds of things, there are a lot of things, that I now pay for subscriptions. I not only pay $10 a month for HBO, I pay $15 a month for something called Next Issue, which some of you have heard me talk about before. For $15 a month, I get digital versions of about 150 top magazines. So instead of subscribing, so what are the things I'm going to pay to subscribe to? Yeah. Yes.
That's for our next topic.
The White House or 3D printing?
3D printing.
My son's got one, and and they're now going retail. You can buy them in Staples and I think Home Depot.
Right.
Yeah. And the answer, do I think we're all going to have a 3D printer in our home anytime soon? No.
What's the? It's novelty versus utility. What's the?
Frequency of utility. How often do I need to do something like this? For most of us, the answer is infrequently at best. And would I be more inclined to go to a Home Depot that had, instead of the home one that would take, this is probably several hours of printing to make this one.
Right.
Yeah. Would I want to go to a Home Depot where they had a higher end device where this would come out in minutes, and the net would be that, gee, I'd get it in the same time. Now I've got to wait hours on my home thing. Now, I send it to them by the time I've driven there.
So let's compare it to computers. 30 years ago, we were building kits.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like Ken Olsen here.
No, but
I know.
But we were building kits, and it was only the hobbyists who used computers because it was a lot of work. And
that's why I'm saying I don't want to sound like Ken Olsen. Who needs a computer in their home?
Right.
Who needs a 3D printer in their home?
That's where I was going.
Yeah. Who needs a 3D? What are you gonna?
But today, it's not that I have a computer in my home. I have a mobile communication device, or I have I have devices that solve problems for me. Right now, this is a solution looking for a problem in my home.
But what's the problem in your home? How many physical things do you bring into your home in a month that could reasonably be supplanted?
That are not food?
Right.
I can 3D print some food,
or body parts, or you never know when you're going to need an ear. I think 3D printing is a hugely exciting manufacturing process, But in terms of
so there's
its
that
broad
gap.
applicability,
There's the hobbyists over here, and there's the commercial usage over here, but it hasn't become consumer because there's no use case for it.
yeah, I'm trying to identify what the use case is, and you might say, okay, there are things you don't bring into your house now because it's not worth going out to get them, the cost is too high, whatever. I love nothing more than brainstorming what I would do with new technologies. The brainstorm of what I would do with new technology, with 3D printing for a consumer application, that requires me having it in the home is limited. Yeah, I lost a game piece instead of, calling up Milton Bradley and get, who plays physical games.
It also goes against convention because I would sooner have the interface to the printer and then have someone else with the mass capacity for 3D printing that I just take a piece of.
Right. The interesting conversation also comes, this is one, if we were talking about physical printers,
right,
for documents like this, it's actually more cost effective for us to output to a Staples or a Kinko's or something like that. The cost of consumables is so crazily high that on a cost per page basis, it's...
Yeah, but then you have the gas to get to Staples.
Yeah, and more importantly, the cost even multiplied over by the, is still an insignificant number. So yeah, it's cheaper to print to a shared service, but it's cheap enough to do at home.
Right.
Here, it's cheaper to print to a shared service, and my consumption is so limited that, that I don't need to have the capability at home.
All right, so I had one topic here which I may have to keep my mouth shut because I'm a vendor.
I can guess what this one is. Although seeing you keep your mouth shut will be novel.
Yeah. So you were in the analyst space for a long time.
Still am.
You have been. So
yes.
you worked for Gartner
for 10 years.
They're being sued.
Yes.
By one of their by a vendor.
Yes. Over the Magic Quadrant process, where the vendor, accused them of being an overt pay-for-play operation. A vendor by the name of NetScout, who, as you might imagine, fared badly in the Magic Quadrant. They said, we're
sue.
Yeah, we're the market leader.
Sorry, I'm going to sue you because there should be nobody else on the Magic Quadrant but us.
Yeah, they didn't fare well, and they basically said that Gartner is in the pay-for-play business,
right.
that the fact that they take money from vendors, it's a thinly kept secret, that in fact if you pay money to Gartner, you will fare better and or appear in Magic Quadrants. Right. And boy, number one, not a good tactic. At so many levels. First of all, somebody sued Gartner a few years ago on the Magic Quadrant. And if you ever have read the legal language around the Magic Quadrant, they've got this thing so disclaimed at the wazoo. It basically, says it's unsuitable for kitty litter or, any other
right,
thing, let alone
small children.
Yeah. So one, they've got it incredibly disclaimed.
Right.
Two, I think they're wrong. And I've spent some of my time on the analyst relations side of the business,
right.
and are doing some amount of work. I've got a couple of colleagues who have a business called the Skills Connection, and I'm working with them. In the Skills Connection, the whole business, pretty much so, is helping vendors navigate the Gartner Magic Quadrant process.
Right.
And what I've seen over the years, I've made the observation, is I've seen vendors spend no money and get good outcomes. I've seen vendors spend a lot of money and get bad outcomes.
Right,
so I think the answer is, can you use money to your advantage to fare better in the process? Yes. Does that mean it's inherently pay for play, where if you spend money, you will do better, or if you don't spend money, they will punish you? Categorically, in my mind, that is not the case.
There are two things about the Magic Quadrant. One is the validity of it, but the other is is how it's used. So
yeah,
How many enterprise or mid-sized look at, let's say I need to make a decision on a vendor, and they're not going to read.
That's one of the reasons why NetScout sued, that they were in advanced discussions with some clients who, when they saw the Magic Quadrant and they weren't in the winner's circle, terminated the conversations.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a reality.
Yeah, it's hugely impactful. And this lawsuit makes the point. I mean, heck, if I'm Gartner, there are excerpts from there I put in my marketing materials. This is so hugely influential. You vendors should work closely with us, and you users who aren't using it this way ought to look at us. So, I mean, I think it's the best piece of marketing. Gartner's probably, going, well, let's not get this lawsuit dismissed. Let's let it go on for, a year, because every time these guys open their mouths, they're helping us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There are two parties besides Gartner that are in that value chain. There's the vendors, and then there's the buyers. Are the buyers misusing the Magic Quadrant?
Well, let me give you the classic yes or no answer.
Okay.
The no is oftentimes, the reason why they use it is I may not want this vendor in, and I've got to come up with a rationale. So I can go to my boss and give them the 17 reasons why I don't think these guys are good for us, or I can point to the Magic Quadrant.
Is it another case of no one got fired for buying at IBM? Meaning, if I bought something in the Magic Quadrant, it's a CYA?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. And are there people, like if you exclude somebody because they're not in the leaders quadrant, Gartner themselves would tell you you're misusing it. So does it get misused? Yeah, but that's the beauty and the power of the Magic Quadrant. It's a simple 2x2 matrix. Being here is good, being there is bad, and its simplicity is its power, and that naturally lends itself to misuse. But if you as a user misuse it, is that Gartner? I mean, that's why I look at all sorts of technologies, and people say, "Ooh, that's a bad technology," or "That's a good." I don't think things are inherently good or bad. It's how we use them. Can we waste all sorts of time on social media? Does that mean social media is bad? No, it means you're perhaps haven't figured out how to use it for personal or professional advantage yet. Same with the Magic Quadrant.
Well, here's another question. So from the brand side, and I think maybe this is somewhat what you're getting at in terms of spending money. From the brand side, the steps I'm going to take to get myself into the leader are steps that would improve my business regardless of whether or not it's true or false.
Well, sort of true. I mean, the answer is there are things you may have to do to fare well in the Magic Quadrant that don't necessarily help you in your business. Okay. They're just understanding the Gartner evaluation process and make sure you play the game properly. So what are the things that they weight, and how do you answer the questions properly? What information can you provide? So there are things that don't necessarily help your business, and then there are things that absolutely help your business. Some of what I've done over the years on the analyst relations side are identifying messaging gaps. So if the analyst is going to ding you for lack of vision, if we think of the analyst as a proxy for enterprise buyers, if I can't explain my story to the analyst, maybe I can't just explain it. I haven't done a good job of explaining it to the customer too.
Right. So that's what I mean.
There are absolutely elements of that at play.
So some of it is understanding how to navigate the process, but there's a part of it that's also just, this is going to make your business better.
Yeah, and if you've got a good business, I mean, some of the things why this particular vendor didn't end up in the leaders quadrant, we don't know the details enough to be able to answer that. But I think some of it is, it may well be that they didn't answer the question, play the game right, or there are fundamental vision differences. That Gartner thinks vendors need to be doing X, vendors instead decide, no, I don't want to be doing X, I want to do Y, and they make a decision that's best for their business in their mind. even if it doesn't reflect well in the Magic Quadrant, and that's one of the risks and one of the challenges you have with Gartner being in such a power position. I've thought for a long time, and I hope somebody steals my business idea because I've never done it. I want to go out and maybe get the domain GartnerResponds.com and have a forum for the discussion of the Magic Quadrant, that's open, because that's not going to take place on Gartner.com.
Right.
What's the what's the opportunity for a vendor to have a vendor-neutral discussion about a Magic Quadrant right now? That forum doesn't exist.
Right.
And would there be value to something like that? I think when you've got a authority as powerful as Gartner and recognizing that the Magic Quadrant is a force, maybe there's an opportunity for a watchdog discussion kind of opportunity. I have no idea what NetScout's paying its lawyer, but would they pay me $50,000 to have that vendor neutral forum? It's a lot less, and if I get $50,000 a vendor, can I, how many vendors are not in the leaders quadrant who think they should be? I've got, there's my business plan.
But can't you be successful?
Sky Fernandez, who does, a session here. Sky, I'll be here next time, with my business plan for how we turn, exactly what's going on here into a business opportunity.
All right, so we've got a few minutes left, and we come up to my favorite segment. Kudos and pet peeves.
Yes.
Do you have any?
Well, you've got a pet peeve.
I've got a couple of pet peeves. This month, actually.
Yeah. You can be a cranky guy today.
One pet peeve I have is, and I'm gonna call out Salesforce because it was Salesforce.com. I signed up for Salesforce.com with the prior company, and I cancel my account, and I keep getting emails. So I click unsubscribe. It says log into your account.
But I don't have an account.
But I can't log in.
Yeah.
So you get enough spam, and related to that is unsubscribe should be one click. Why do they need to have me type my email address that I got the spam
email from? Yeah.
So you sent me a spam, and I click unsubscribe, and then you need me to type my email address in to make sure. What's that?
I think even more than that, that there are those sites, and I believe, I don't want to, I'll call out the New York Times because it might have been them.
Right.
But there are sites where I can sign up online, but if you want to unsubscribe, you've got to call someone.
Right.
Yeah. And there's an instance, a YouTube video that made the rounds a couple of weeks ago. I believe it was Comcast, somebody was trying to unsubscribe from. And they had
that was Comcast.
Yeah,
oh, no, that was Comcast.
Yeah, they were on the phone for 15, 20 minutes, and the guy wouldn't let them unsubscribe. Was it? Yeah. Well, some of it, I think, after a while, the guy decided, he was going to have some fun with it.
Oh, my God.
But the call agent, saying I want to unsubscribe was not enough. And I've had those things because they go through the script. What if I offer you this? What if I offer you that? Yeah.
Right. And it's sales disguised as customer service.
Yes, so it's a lot easier to buy than to not buy.
Right. And related to that peeve, I guess it's a little different. So I got a new credit card, and that means that all of the now I know every subscription service I have because my credit card is.
Yeah.
That's one. If you ever want to know what subscription service, just cancel your credit card and get a new one, right?
Yeah.
But there was one vendor, and I wish I could remember who it was, but when I went to change the credit card, usually they'll say they'll take whatever your outstanding balance is and charge it to the new card. This one didn't. I actually had to call up, and they had to transfer the outstanding balance to the new card.
Really? Yeah. Yeah. Because I've got some card, one that recently expired, and some you can merely change the expiration date of the card.
Right.
Yeah.
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 But this was a whole new card. I had to put a whole new one.
Yeah. Some I've even had where even though I didn't change the expiration date, whatever, the fact that the number was still valid seemed to have worked. So whether they've got a relationship with the card company, I don't know. But yeah, but that whole being able to undo things instead of, making it easy to do. It used to be Cablevision. I could change my channel lineup online, what packages I've got. Can't do that anymore.
Well, we're running out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today on Pardon My Disruption. I'm Alan Berkson and Jonathan Yarmis. We're broadcasting live from the Stamford Innovation Center in beautiful downtown Stamford. Come join us. We have some people here.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
The second Friday of every month.
The second Friday of every month, and we'll see you next month.